Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Jabbering Jake Podcast. We are at episode 10, and wow, I can't believe we've come this far. When I started this, I didn't know how long I would be doing it. The future is still always uncertain, but I am having a blast doing this podcast, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And we've finally gotten to double-digit episodes, so it's been an exciting journey so far. Thank you to all of you who have stuck around and been listening and watching up until now. I hope that you continue to enjoy the podcast and continue to keep watching. And if you want to share this podcast with friends, family, acquaintances, all that jazz that I've talked about before, please let people know about the podcast. It's the best way to help out, the best way to get this podcast out there so more people can listen to it and share it with the people they know and help grow the podcast. But I just want to extend a big thank you to everybody who's been listening, everyone who's here already, and who's been sticking with me so far. It really does mean a lot, and you really are the people that make this podcast worth doing each week and worth recording an episode and putting something out there and coming and sitting in this stuffy closet that makes me a bit sweaty each week for 30 minutes or so to just record me talking nonsense, being a little silly, having a little fun, and put something out there to the world that otherwise, without anyone to listen or care about, it would just kind of be pointless. So thank you to all of you who've stuck around. Speaking of sweating my butt off in this stuffy closet, though, well, obviously, as you all know, we are getting closer to fall, which means the weather is cooling down. Actually, we're officially in fall since about a month ago, about September 21st or something like that. So we're already in fall. We're on our way. The leaves have been falling. It's been getting colder, and even down here in Alabama now, even though I'm originally from up north, used to much colder temperatures, I definitely got to admit it's getting chilly even for me down here. I mean, mind you, in the fall, when you start getting down to the 50s and whatnot, it's always going to be cold anyway. But my brother and I were talking, and we were worried that maybe we were starting to acclimate to the weather here and get used to the heat, and more alarmingly, maybe not retain our resistance to the cold. You know, it's like in a video game or something when you create a character and you can choose a character that has a base like cold resistance. I think we were both concerned we might be losing that a little bit. But anyway, it's definitely been cooling down. Fall is on its way here. Fall is here. Winter's on its way here, and certainly the winters down here won't be as cold or as extreme as the winters up north where I'm from, but it's definitely a different world down here. Everything, when the snow does come, shuts down and everyone's off the roads, and it's like a ghost town sometimes. If you go into town, it can be like a ghost town. When I was working at a job down here, I remember making a joke that I hadn't ever gotten snow days since actually since university, interestingly enough. We had a big blizzard one year, which even canceled class and labs and whatnot the day after the blizzard. So I was gonna say, wow, I haven't had a snow day since like junior high school, because where I went to for high school, it was a boarding school. So there was really no such thing as a snow day per se. Some of the teachers didn't live on campus, and some of the students, there were students that commuted. And so maybe they wouldn't be able to make it, but that school never had a snow day. But normally a university might not have one either, but we got a crazy blizzard one year that actually got it canceled, interestingly enough, for the first time since, I believe they said 1997, which, interestingly enough, was the year I was born. So, just goes to show you how powerful the forces of nature and the weather can be. But, right, so the point I was making was that I got snow days off from work sometimes down here because the roads were too dangerous and they told people to stay home. And I was just kind of chuckling to myself because that had never happened since I was a student. Uh, but on the flip side, something they definitely get down here that we would never get in Vermont is tornado season. Up in Vermont, when we had spring, we called it mud season because we just got a bunch of mud because all the snow that built up would melt and all that water would go run off the roads onto the fields and the grass, and the ground would be all wet and muddy. Simple enough. There were a couple years that summer came up so quickly that it kind of flash dried the ground, and we more or less skipped muddy season, which was interesting. But down here in Alabama, they got tornado season, which is definitely something we don't get up north. And that is another thing that has, when I work down here in Alabama, caused me to either go home early or miss some work days for a tornado day. And actually, there have been days where tornadoes went right by the office where I worked. If I would have been there, it would have been kind of dicey. But luckily, where I live right now, the tornadoes definitely come through, but they don't really go right directly on top of where my parents or I live. We tend to be generally pretty safe. But the recent Hurricane Ian that was coming up the coast really ravaged the people of Florida. It's really unfortunate to see and hear about what's been going on. I didn't realize at first when I heard about, the hurricane coming up, the magnitude of the destruction and the power and the loss that it would bring. But seeing and hearing more about it, it's just crazy and heartbreaking how it's been affecting people. And I remember I woke up one morning and I got a message from somebody I worked with just checking with me to make sure I was okay because of the storm heading up the coast. Luckily for us here, it never really came and hit us. We're kind of far enough west of it, I think, that we didn't get hit. But definitely my heart goes out to all the people that have had to deal with the aftermath of that. And, more power to the people that have stepped up and volunteered to go help with relief efforts to help those people build back. So I can't remember if this is something I talked about on the podcast before, but it's definitely something. Well, at first when I say it, it's rather obvious. I think a lot of people would definitely agree. But, it's something I've kind of been introspecting and thinking about and just really taking note of recently, which is that there are no shortcuts in life. So there's kind of a plus, pros and cons to that, right? There's no shortcuts in life, which means that you have to put in the work to achieve things. They're not just going to come to you. And that is probably one of the best and worst things about it. Obviously, it means that you're very unlikely to just get lucky and have good things or prosperity or success come to you. But it also means that the solution is really simple. Just put in the work, put in the effort, make not necessarily the right moves right away, but as you put in effort towards what your goals are in life, you learn more knowledge about reaching them. and then you're able to make better, more efficient decisions or whatever. But the point is that if you just put in the efforts, achieving success, whatever that version of success for you is more within reach or more accessible than you might think. I'm not saying, yeah, you just keep working hard, you'll be a billionaire, super healthy, never get sick, biggest house in the world type thing. Everybody's got their different versions of success. But if you work towards it, your goals will be more achievable than you realize. One of the things, one of the best examples that I have for that is things like weight loss and nutrition. Like with weight loss, with eating and nutrition, it really is just as simple as calories in versus calories out. A lot of the pop culture or media or science out there is saying all these things like, well, certain calories are different from others, and these different diets like keto, Atkins, diets like that come out that say they help to activate a body's ability to quickly burn off fat. It's actually really not, there's not any magic to it like that. It really is just, it's kind of like if you have a vehicle right now. We'll say a typical, like, well, it could apply to either gas or electric, really. But let's say you want to drive somewhere and you have a fuel tank or a battery. And obviously you need to fill that with fuel or keep it charged for it to go somewhere. Now, this first analogy works better with traditional combustion engines, but if you start it up and you just have the motor running, even if you're not going anywhere, and it's just sitting there idling, it's going to burn off some fuel. And our bodies are kind of like that. Even if you're not exercising or doing anything, your body's still burning off energy and burning off calories because, our bodies use up energy to stay alive and breathe and pump blood to our organs and stay warm. But obviously, if you're exercising or you're going somewhere, if you're exercising your body or you're getting in your vehicle and going somewhere, in both cases, you're going to start to burn more fuel. And basically, if you keep filling and filling and filling it with fuel, you're going to keep storing more fuel. Like in your vehicle, you have a gas tank, although it's a good thing for you to have your gas tank full of gas in your car. But in the human body, it's, well, fat storage. That's your fuel tank. And in both cases, it's actually pretty good to have at least a little bit stored away. You don't want to be too lean and have no body fat. The body needs it. But if you keep filling and filling and filling, the tank's going to fill up. And the capacity of the tank, I think, is a lot higher in the human body than in a vehicle, because once you hit the capacity of the fuel tank, you can't fill it anymore. It's just going to overflow. But you can, in theory, keep filling the fuel tank on your body. You just keep putting on more weight. But if you just keep putting in sort of the right amount that's being burned as the vehicle is running or being burned as your body is working or exercising, you're going to maintain. And obviously, if you put in less than you're burning, you're going to decrease. So it's like if you're driving your vehicle and you don't fill it up with gas, eventually it'll run out. So it really is simple. The difference, sort of the differences are obviously the quality of the food you eat can determine other things like your overall health. If you have super really dirty gasoline with a lot of like sediment in it, or it's like not very combustible, maybe eventually it could wreck your motor. Whereas if you have this really expensive premium clean fuel, your engine's going to run more cleanly. Same thing with your body. That's really where the benefits of what types of food you eat come in. But you could be eating absolute crap, but if you're eating less calories than if you're consuming less calories than you're burning, you're still going to lose weight, even if you're eating really crappy food. And vice versa, you can be eating really healthy food, but if you're eating tons and tons of it and shoveling in more calories than you're burning, you're still going to put on weight. Just other factors of your health will be affected. But the most important thing is to just have a diet that you can sustain for your life and that you also enjoy. So there's that. Interesting, interesting kind of tangent I took, talking about, how there's no shortcuts in life, but simply putting in the work can help you achieve success, and then segueing into a little bit of nutrition advice. Bear in mind, I've never studied nutrition. I'm not qualified. I'm not a professional. Just relaying information that I seem to have picked up and have kind of experimented with myself a little bit as I've been trying to get more healthy lately and working out more and eating better. But also one of those things I was kind of meditating on and thinking about when I was thinking about how there really is no shortcuts into life. And you just got to start with small little habits that build up to bigger ones. I think this is a lesson I learned a lot when I was in university and going through school, and is that it can be really overwhelming if you try to think about too much at once. If you think about how our bodies and how our nervous systems and brains work, there are so many different stimuli hitting us all at one time, but our brain only focuses on a few of them because our brain simply can't handle and process every single signal that's hitting it at once. It would lock out and be unable to function. That's why a lot of the times you're not even conscious about your breathing or about your pulse or about anything like that. You don't control any of that. Every once in a while, if you think about it, then, think about your breathing, then it's consciously on your mind. But you're not thinking about it all the time. You're not necessarily thinking about what the ground feels beneath your feet. Maybe if there's a breeze going through, you don't necessarily feel how warm or how cool that breeze is. Maybe if you're in an environment with an ambient noise, like white noise or something like that, after a while you tend to not really, like anything, sights might be a little bit different. Sight is kind of something you're almost actively focusing on, and then unless maybe you start to stare out into space. But things like hearing, touch, smell, taste, our bodies can start to numb or block those things out if we're getting the same thing over and over, if we have something else we're focusing on because our body just can't process it all at once. If there's a smell or a sound or something going on in the environment where you're in, and it's repetitive and it keeps continuing on, after a while you get used to it and you don't really notice it. That's part of the body's way of saying, all right, we don't need to keep processing that. It doesn't necessarily mean anything to us. It doesn't give us any new information, and it's been here for a while. And so this was a lesson I kind of learned, was that the best way to go about life, I've found, especially for achieving goals or learning new skills, sure, the best way is going to be grinding away at those skills in a meaningful way, not just some random way, at least not until later when you have enough knowledge in something to get more creative with it. But really grinding away in a structured and meaningful way at those skills for as long as possible, with appropriate rests. That's a whole other area of psychology that I'm certainly not qualified to speak of. You could listen to something like the Huberman Lab podcast where he talks more about it in terms of timing, how you time out learning blocks in sort of 90-minute cycles, and then like rest cycles where your brain compounds that information. Get your 8 hours of sleep. That's a big one too. But obviously the best way to improve a skill or something like that is to really grind it out as much as possible in an effective and efficient way with meaningful skill building to get the most benefit from it. Obviously, for most people, especially once you're sort of out there in life, working or having a family, it's not feasible to be like grinding away for, 2, 3, 4 hours on something that you're working towards You got other things in life, other commitments that you got to focus on. You got a job, you got a family. Those things take time. So especially in a case like that, especially if you're trying to make it a habit, the best thing to do, one, you got to be good at time management. That's just like a non-negotiable skill that I think everyone needs to work on, and I'm still pretty bad at it, I'm going to admit. In theory, I have things mapped out pretty well, but seldom do I ever stick to that schedule. And that's kind of another thing you got to learn about life, is that depending on how you want to arrange the phrase, I've heard many different iterations of it, but it more or less boils down to you make plans and life laughs at you. Something to that effect, anyway. You got to be prepared to and plan for when things don't go according to plan. That's a big one too. But time management is a big one. And the other thing is, for certain things that you're trying to work towards, working on the small moments of it every day. Think about it this way, and this is a big problem of mine. If I say I want to spend an hour and a half a day working on a skill, let's even say 3 hours, working on a new skill or learning a new thing, and I block out the time for that, if I have that 3 hour chunk planned out and life happens, something happens that prevents me from getting that full 3 hour block in, if I go, oh, well, it's ruined now, I don't have as much time. One, I mean, that's, certainly a lie. I still have the rest of the time, right? Let's say I burn an hour, let's say I burn half that time and I only have an hour and a half left of that time. Still use that time. If you're all good to go now, still use that time. But if that keeps happening where your stuff's cutting into that time and you say, oh, well, I won't bother now, I can't get my whole session in, don't let that stop you. That's completely incorrect. Even if you're trying to start building a habit and you just don't have the discipline, right? Let's say you're meant to do that 3 hours and you just can't bring yourself to sit down for that long. You just aren't in the mindset where you can do that. You want to do other things. Hopefully it's still something you really want to do. Maybe it's not, but if it genuinely is something you still want to do, then start small. Maybe you want to work up to 3 hours. Start with 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 15, 10 minutes. Start with 5 minutes. At least doing 5 minutes a day of something you want to learn or pick up on a week is better than zero, right? Let's say I want to learn a language. If I want to block out 2 hours to work on that every, 3 times, we'll say 3 times a week, but I never seem to find the time for it, and I don't get it done every week, then what am I benefiting? But if I at least do like 5 minutes a day, that's half an hour I've spent on it that week at least, if I'm able to stick to 5 minutes a day. Because most people have 5 minutes to spare. And if you don't, God bless you, you are way too busy. So that's, I think, the best way to go about things. Start small. Even if it is something that you might be able to fit 3 hours in for. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. Sometimes oftentimes the most difficult thing is to get the boulder rolling. But once you get the boulder rolling, the momentum builds. You might not even realize that the boulder you're trying to push is at the top of a mountain. And you just gotta push it across that flat area until it hits the hill and starts rolling downwards. And then all of a sudden, you've been spending 5 minutes a day on it this week. You spend 10 minutes a day on it next week. Or you spend 5 minutes a day on it for a month. You spend 10 minutes a day on it next month. That first month, you're still getting 2.5 hours worth of whatever that thing is that month. And Then if you start doing it 10 minutes the next month, you're doubling that. So now you're getting 5 hours of that in. And then eventually you'll be like, yeah, I can do a half an hour of this a day. I can do an hour of this a day. I can do an hour and a half of this a day. All of a sudden, you're doing an hour and a half for, every month. And all of a sudden, you're putting 45 hours into that new skill or something you're trying to learn, that language or whatever. Before you know it, that's a pretty formidable amount of time you're putting into something. And it starts with something as simple as putting a few minutes into it each day. So, I had another. Probably going to talk about this next episode. I was going to talk about my brother and I. We started rewatching the Harry Potter movies again recently, just to rewatch them. And I was going to record them for this episode because it's episode 10, and it would have been kind of funny to call this like episode 9 3/4. But I started talking about other things at the beginning to give some time and to sort of amble into it and to make sure that this episode was going to be long enough. And now there's only probably a few minutes left. Not enough time that I want to give to talking about rewatching the Harry Potter movies. And I would probably record 2 episodes in a row right now, but I'm actually preparing for a trip up north again, back home to Vermont for a little bit, and to Canada to visit some friends and family and stuff up north. So I won't be able to record 2 episodes now, because if I did, I might be able to record that one and publish that one and publish this one instead. But I guess I'll have to think of another clever name for both of these episodes. Yeah, there's a few things I want to talk about and mention. Maybe I'll save for that episode. Maybe I'll save for the one after. I for my birthday, I'd ordered something called the Steam Deck, which Steam is this program made by this company called Valve. For those of you unfamiliar, that is basically the virtual version of GameStop for PCs. If you play video games on your PC, that's where you can buy a lot of games digitally to just download, and they're all managed through one software and a nice, convenient, sometimes, interface. They made something called the Steam Deck, which is basically like a miniature PC for like mobile gaming. And you may be thinking like, okay, yeah, there's been Game Boys and Nintendo DS and PlayStation Portable and now like the Nintendo Switch around for a while. Why is that so special? Well, I mean, with things like the Game Boy and then the Nintendo DS and PSP and stuff like that, is they basically had to play games specifically made for mobile gaming devices. This Steam Deck is basically like you can take the games that you would normally play on your computer at your desk or your laptop and play them on a portable gaming device within reason and limits. Not everything is going to be perfectly compatible, but I'd ordered that for my birthday back in March, and it's been months in the making because they've had to manufacture them and get them out to people in sort of waves. I got mine recently, and it's really cool. I've been testing it out a little bit, trying it, in car rides or whatever, not while I'm driving. And I've been enjoying it so far. And I didn't even realize there's other similar systems like it that have been out before or are coming out that are sort of like its competition. So I might be looking into those as well, just to see what they're all about. But that's a cool thing. And maybe I'll talk about that more in another episode. I'm going to be starting a new D&D campaign soon, which I think I might have mentioned on here before, with my buddy Brandon, and originally for his Twitch channel. I think he's going to upload them to YouTube now because his Twitch, his live streams, he likes to be more interactive, and he doesn't want to try and do both. But starting a new D&D campaign with him, and my D&D group that I was already playing with. It's just kind of like, my original D&D group plus, or 2.0, just with one extra person added on. Well, one person subtracted, one person added. Unfortunately, one of our guys in the original group kind of stopped being able to play with us because he's in a different time zone. But we're going to be starting that soon. Maybe I'll probably talk about that on a further episode too. But it's cool. It's going to be something called Spelljammer, which is kind of like a intersection between fantasy and sci-fi. So we're going to have spells and stuff like that, but also cool technology. But I'll talk about that more in another episode. We'll talk about the Harry Potter episode. And we'll probably be getting some guests on here soon. While I'm up north, I do want to record some guest episodes with people while I'm up there. And I know some of you have been asking about having certain guests on the episode. I'm still working on it. I've reached out to them. Coordinating with people can be tricky, even if they're right down the street or really close to you. But we'll be getting some guest episodes on here soon. I'm still debating whether those will be bonus episodes or they'll be regular episodes, but expect to be seeing those soon. And in the meantime, thank you all for listening. Remember to share this podcast. If you've been enjoying it, if you think other people enjoy it, tell people about it. Share the Spotify version, the YouTube version, whatever you want, as long as it gets the word out there. And until next time, thanks for listening. Bye.